Well, good day and welcome to Advanced SIP Routing, the 6th of our monthly FreeSBC How To series webinars. Since the dawn of telephone operator switchboard, call routing has challenged network engineers and managers with complex routing algorithms. While the technology sure has changed, the need remains the same. Far from the peer-to-peer connectivity initially envisioned with the original mMusic RFC, SIP now enables least cost routing decisions based on dialed number, complex load balancing schemes to manage network outages, and it seems that SIP routing keeps network administrators always looking for a better means of managing call traffic. And based on the large number of registrations in today's event, it seems like SIP session routing remains a topic of great interest. Some introductions to get started. I'm Alan Percy. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at TelcoBridges and today's event moderator. Joining us again today is Luke Morissette. He's the Director of Customer Support and one of the founders of TelcoBridges. And Luke, thanks again for being part of today's event.
Yeah, hello, Alan. It's my pleasure to take part in this webinar today.
Excellent. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. As a live participant, you'll have the opportunity to interact with today's speakers and hope you do pose your questions and comments on today's topic using the Q&A panel. To pose a question or comment, open the Q&A panel by clicking on the box in the upper left of your screen. We'll cover your questions towards the end of the session. We've also found that some attendees may need to adjust the webinar view options to see the full screen. If you're not seeing the full slide on your screen, move your mouse to the top of the webinar window and a view option selection will appear. Choose an option that best fits your screen. Also, today's event is being recorded and all those that have registered will receive a link to the recording for on-demand playback. We hope you share this link with your coworkers and others that would find the discussion valuable. And we're glad to have you, our attendees, with us today. I encourage you to use this opportunity to interact with Luke and myself and pose your questions and comments, and hope you do so. So a quick look back. This series started with an introductory session where we described the capabilities and services included in FreeSBC, along with its unique business model. After that, we showed how to install FreeSBC on bare metal server and also on a VMware virtualized server. From there, Luke showed how to configure FreeSBC with SIP trunks. And last month, we explored the means of curbing robocall fraud with a stir-shaken integration with Transnexus. And if you missed any of the previous sessions, recordings are available in the freesbc.com video library, and also you can find them on YouTube. So what do we got planned for today? First of all, we're going to start with a quick overview of some of the various SIP routing techniques and triggers that can be part of making decisions in possible destinations. From there, we'll move on and take a look at the means to manage a route table to manage routing. After that, we're going to look at using scripts to make routing decisions. And then we'll start to close things up with a couple of use case examples. We've got 2 customer stories that we want to share with you at the end. And then we'll wrap up with your questions and answers. So Luke, before we get moving here, what are some of the conditions and actions that can be used to make routing decisions?
Yes, so what we have is the FreeSBC can be receiving calls from different sources, right? So when we receive those calls, we get a lot of incoming parameters, and then these incoming parameters can be used to take routing decision, right? So you have, for example, the call number, the calling number, and then also where the call comes from, right? And then you can send those information to either our own internal routing, or you can send those information to a Radius AAA server or a SIP redirect server, right? So when these are sent there, then you can take some routing decision. You can have, for example, in our internal routing, you can have algorithms to choose the outgoing networks that can be where the call can be sent to, the priority of those networks, and you can also modify outgoing parameters to the different destinations.
All right, so that's just a basic overview of routing. There's a number of different elements that are part of the decision making for where to send a call, right? Either it can be done through some of the internal codes within it based on radius server or SIP redirect server. So the question is, how do you manage that, right? So what are some of the decisions and how does that logic work?
Yeah, so here we're going to be looking more at the internal routing, right? So we can have other webinars on radius and SIP redirect, but this time we're going to look at the internal routing. So you have some incoming attributes in our static routing table, which you can configure, like the calling number and the network access point. Okay, so here we call it NAP, and that is the a network that is reachable by the FreeSBC. Then you have outgoing attributes, which you can remap either the call or the calling number and choose the outgoing network. And you can add some custom attributes to that. For example, priority, weight, and there can be others.
Okay. Right? So some basic calling and network access point parameters can drive the destination of where the calls are going to go.
Yep.
And now, what if there's an option that for higher priority calls or lower priority destinations to go? So what's the option with that?
Yeah, exactly. So if you go to the next slide, I showed an example. So you have the three first entries in the route. Have different priorities. So you see here priority 10, 20, and 30 going to those three different outgoing networks. Priority 10, it will be my highest priority. So if there is a call that comes in from the network called microSIP, then I will have three possible routes. One is called Bell, one is called level 3, one is called ITSP, and Bell will be chosen as the first possible routes. If that route, for example, is down or for some other reason, then it's going to go to the next, try the next route, and the next one if, again, it's busy or if it's occupied. All right?
Makes sense. Okay. Well, what if instead of using priority, what if we wanted to spread the load and we wanted to do some load sharing?
Exactly. So I created three other routes just below, and these ones will load share the call. So what happens is that a call comes in. In this case, it's the network access point is called soft phone. When the call comes in to the FreeSBC, it will check the priority, and you see the priority for these three routes are 50. So that means they are equal priority, and it will look then at the weight. In that case, the weight will say on which networks you want to route the calls. Here I put three identical values, so there will be 1/3 of the calls sent to each of those networks. You can change this weight to have more or less towards certain networks. So you can have, for example, 50 for Bell and 100 for ITSP and level 3, and there's going to be twice as many calls on these one compared to Bell.
Let's see. One other option I think is doing routing by the called number. I think you mentioned that, and I think this is probably a pretty common request. Moving on to routing by, oops, there we go. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so on the next slide, or you can just look at the route just below. It's the one that has a regular expression. The call in this case coming from ITSP, and then we, in this case, we have a prefix, right? So a prefix was put maybe by a soft switch or another system, and we can route according to this prefix. So 771, and you see there is a regular expression in the route. We use Perl regular expression to create those rules, and you can configure that to choose the routes. And then at the remap call, what we do is we remove this prefix because we don't need it anymore on the outgoing calls, and it will be redirected to the soft phone network.
Got it. That's a way of stripping off the country code or the access code.
Yep, yeah, it can be the country code as well.
Yep. What about a situation with calling numbers, or a method for that too?
Yeah, so we have seen this sometimes as well. Customers want to route according to the calling number. So then you can do also a regular expression on the calling and then redirect that to an outgoing network. You can also remap the calling number or not according to your needs.
Oh, I think I lost you. Oh, there you go. You there? Okay.
Yep, it's good.
Okay.
So then,
All right. I've had a little internet problem here, so sorry about that. So the routing table by calling number,
yep,
similar situation based on the regular expression and the calling number, you can then direct calls off to a particular, and I can imagine this might be a way for a particular customer who has a preference for a particular carrier
yep,
based on their calling number, then you could direct all their calls used to a particular carrier based on some service level agreement that you've got.
that's right.
Excellent. All right. So what about narrowing down the codecs? And I think you give an example here where one particular provider doesn't want to use G729.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can restrict, for example, some of those codecs. So we have seen a lot of networks which don't support either G723, G729. So then you can force that in a profile. And when you select that route, if you go to the next slide, Alan, you can see that you can choose the destination profile like this. So on this particular route, we may want to say that we don't want any G729. And in this case, you see it's the name of the profile that is G729, but of course you can configure a lot of other parameters according to this route.
Well, the table seems pretty powerful, but I can see how there might be other configurations that might outstrip the capabilities of the table. So why don't you share a little bit about these advanced SIP routing with scripts?
Right. So of course, if the routing table doesn't do what you need, we have scripts, right? So we can construct those scripts, or even our customers can do those scripts. We have more than 50 that are already done and available for our customers to use. And for example, we have a black and white listing, a label routing. We can play announcements on calling number. And we have other customizable scripts that we can use. For example, add or remove custom SIP header, custom call detail records, and these are all things we can do. So I wanted to show you, for example, the black and white listing case. So what you do is you create a little CSV file, okay, comma separated file, and you input either a calling or a call number, and you input if you want to blacklist or whitelist these numbers, and then you load this file in the system, and if it matches one of those entries, it will be the call will be refused. Right? So it's a very simple system to block unwanted calls in the system.
Hmm.
And yeah, just I put a link below. This is our wiki, TelcoBridges wiki. You can access that to know how to enable this, how to create the file, and how to test it.
Interesting. So talk maybe a little bit about label routing.
Yeah, so label routing is when you have a million of numbers, okay? So you have millions of numbers which can route to various destinations. Each one of them cannot be created as regular expressions because they have each a different possible destination. So you can create label routing. In label routing, you have two sets of files we use. It's still CSV files. And then you input all the call numbers that you want to route in your system, and you attach it to a label. Then, after this, for each of the outgoing networks, you can attach which label can be routed. And you can add more parameters to that. For example, a priority, you can remap the call number and add other custom tables here. So this allows you to do, for example, NPA and X6 routing in those systems.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so again, I put the link on the wiki for this particular application.
Interesting. And also, too, you included some content about manipulating the caller ID or caller info.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And you can do all kinds of changes, right, in those scripts. It's not limited to the functions I'm showing you here, but one of them that have been asked by our customers is be able to add a particular value in the CDR. So this is for the billing platform to recognize some of those calls and maybe bill them differently, right? So for example, this is one case we have done. So we receive a custom SIP header, which has a particular value. And what we do in the routing script is we put that in the call detail records, which can then be sent to either a radius server or can be stored in flat files of CDR.
Interesting. Well, it seems like you can do a lot with the scripts. It seems like a pretty powerful tool. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about some of the use cases, and we've got two of them. And I thought maybe Luke, you could share the story at Marcatel that we just published earlier this week, their case study, which includes lots of different elements and all kinds of things. But maybe we can zero in a little bit on exactly what's happening inside their network.
Yeah, so we've been working with Marcatel for quite some time now, and I can say they like our FreeSBC very much because it can do a lot of things that they need, right? So one of the issues they were having is they do business with a lot of call centers, and these call centers, how can I say, they will transmit a lot of traffic and a lot of calls, right? And what they want to be able to do is limit the number of calls that can, go in the core network from each of those call centers. So they can tune according to the service level agreement with each of those call centers, how many calls can come in and the call rate and all kinds of parameters to control the input to the network. And by default, the FreeSBC has protection against attacks. So if there's other sources that want to access the system, well, they will be automatically blocked by the system, or there are ways to configure and make it even more precise protection against different types of attacks. The other thing the FreeSBC does in their case is they need to modify the calling number according to the region of where the call will be sent to, right? So these systems are localized in central offices, but of course they access all kinds of regions, and what they want to be able to do is make it so the calling number is a local one in that region. And it's very easily done with the FreeSBC.
Right, and there's a couple other interesting twists too. One of them is in how they deploy it. There's a couple different ways that they deploy with a bare metal server or as a VNF. Maybe we'll share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So so the bare metal is for some regions which are, let's say, a high number of sessions. However, some of those devices are deployed close to the call center, right? So then the rate of calls necessary is not as high, or the number of sessions is not as high either. So then we can have this running as a virtual function instead of on a physical server, right? So so there's some ranges of number of sessions. And let's say if you want 60,000 sessions, then you need to go on a bare metal servers. But some other installations works perfectly with on a virtual network.
Awesome, it's a neat story. We also brought a story from our friend Paul over at Netcom in Cyprus, and he's got a FreeSWITCH deployment where he's providing enterprise class telephony services and communication services to his customers, where he's got a cluster of 2 different FreeSWITCH servers. And what he's implemented is he's put all that traffic into a FreeSBC SBC, which then based on some routing tables and some other logic, then spreads his traffic out over 3 different service providers from local and a couple different international providers delivering calls for his customers. And it also resolves or sort of integrates the differences between the providers into a common configuration, so that it makes his FreeSWITCH configuration quite a bit simpler. And last but not least, of course, is protecting his network from possible attack over that solution. So that's another interesting story where FreeSBC is doing the routing plus a number of the other functions necessary to protect the network. So thanks to Paul for sharing that story with us too. So we kind of close things up here, get close to it. Before we get to our Q&A, I wanted to share with you some of the additional resources. We've got 3 key things that I think we'd find valuable. One of them is our video library on the freesbc.com website. It's very easy to find. There's a slider on the homepage. Also, too, the wiki can be found at docs.telcobridges.com, and that provides a lot of the technical details that you might be interested in. How to do configurations, how to do these various installations in a more of a written form or fashion. And then, of course, there's the forums on forums.freesbc.com, and this is where you as partners or customers can share information with others, or can find other information. Like we keep our FAQ from the webinars and questions from the webinars and content up on that site. So there's 3 great resources for you to learn more or to do some more digging if necessary. One other thing I wanted to share with you too is we've got planned another webinar on August 28th with our friends at Comp, where we're going to be talking about network traffic management and using intelligence to better manage traffic through analysis. And that is going to be Tuesday, August 28th at 11 o'clock. And the registration link is there, but we will certainly include it in our monthly newsletter, which you should be getting by Thursday or so of this week. So watch for that and be sure to register for this next topic next month. Also, too, we'll be attending a handful of industry events this fall. We'll have a booth at AstraCon, October 8th through 11th in Orlando. I'll be participating at the Illinois Institute of Technology Real-Time Communications event in October. And then later in December, we'll be participating in the SIP-NOC event in Herndon, Virginia. And if you'd like to set up an appointment or arrange for a meeting with myself or anyone else in the organization, you can reach find availability at calendary.com/Alan D. Percy. It's a great way to find out when I'm available and when you are too. All right, so let's get to our Q&A. We got a handful of questions here that have worked our way into the queue here. And so Luke, let's start out with the first question from Katerina. Some examples of regular expressions possible, or is it generic Linux-like?
Yeah, so it is a generic library that we use. It's called the Perl Regular Expression Library. And if you permit me, Alan, I will share my screen. Can I do that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, okay. So let me do this here. Okay, you see my screen now?
We do.
All right. So I went to our TB wiki, right, which is docs.telcobridges.com. Here, you get on the main page, and you can search here regex, right? So if I search regex, I get to some of those pages. I choose here the first one in the list. And I have some examples of regular expressions that are, let's say, commonly used, right? So for example, route on 450, this is an optional one. This is 800 or 888 or 877. And all of that is based on the Perl version of regex. There are also some tools online you can use to test those regular expressions before putting them in the system. And you can also test them after you have inserted that in your routing table, right? So when you input your regular expression here, you can go in the routing scripts and test those parameters, right? So you can change a call number here and test if that regular expression is doing what you want.
Cool. That's pretty neat. Awesome. All right. So Katerina also asks about using FreeSBC as a redirect server.
The FreeSBC right now doesn't return SIP 300 or 302 type messages. I'm not saying it could not be done, but let's say for now it's more like a proxy server or a back-to-back user agent.
Got it. Got it. All right. So Alan asks the question, he needs to include a custom SIP header and an X origin. And that's the source of the IP address where the call came from. How can he do that? So
right. So yeah, so you can do that in the routing scripts. Of course, here it has to be a custom routing script because this is a specific type of SIP header. The source IP address you can get from the messages, okay, or the parameters inside the routing script, and then you can use a special line which has a SIP header, and you add the name you want, for example, X origin, and you add this parameter in the routing script, right? So yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Of course, you may need our help to set that up the first time.
Sure. Another question here too, can you route based on NPDI for local number portability, I guess?
Yep, yeah, exactly. LNP is supported, and these NPDI values, they come in the SIP header. It's possible to route according to that. They are available. Hey, let me share my screen again. I want to show you something. So from the TelcoBridges wiki page again, you can search for NPDI, and then you go here in the tutorial. These are all the parameters that are supported, and if I search for NPDI, you can see here the parameter that needs to be used in the routing scripts is called port-in number NPDI, and you can use that to route the calls.
Excellent. Okay. So next question from Mo is FreeSBC supports SIP and TCP for Skype for Business integration?
Unfortunately not. It supports only UDP right now. I know this is in our list of to-dos, and I think it's the next one in the list. So keep posted. I think it's going to come very soon. Skype for Business integration, we have done that before with our TMG platforms, the TDM type platforms. So we know that works. So once we have TCP on the FreeSBC, it will be supported as well.
Right. And that is part of the roadmap. And
yes.
Yep. If someone's interested in more details on that, certainly we'd love to set up a meeting and we'll go through the whole roadmap and give them all the gory detail. In addition to that, you know, security and a number of other things that are on the roadmap. Okay, well that reaches the end of the questions. So, Luke, I'm going to thank you for delivering some awesome content and you know, commend you again for putting together some great material that hopefully should educate folks and give them some many options for where to go with this. I also too wanted to thank our audience for spending some time with us today. As always, we'll have a recording available. You'll find more information in our newsletter, which again I mentioned is coming out on Thursday. And there's other videos in the library that you can certainly use as resources as you continue your journey. So with that, time's about up, so I want to thank everyone for participating and wish everyone a really great day. Thanks again.